The Foreign Affairs Committee are continuing their inquiry into the workings of the Foreign Office and the appointment of Peter Mandelson in particular. And we have just had a break, but we are now continuing our session with Morgan McSweeney. Thank you very much for coming. I understand, could you just introduce who you are? And I understand that there's a brief statement that you want to make before we ask you some questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Morgan McSweeney. I was a former Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister Keir Starmer from October 2024 till February of this year. Chair, thank you for inviting me to appear before this committee today. I hope to assist you in your work as fully as I can. Before addressing the specific matters before you, I'm grateful that you've allowed me to say something briefly. First, I want to say something about the victims and survivors connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Too often, discussions of public figures and appointments can lose sight of the human suffering at the centre of these matters. Women and girls were abused, exploited and scarred. They deserved protection then, and they deserve to be remembered now. I'm sorry for any part this controversy has played in causing further hurt or distress. I've spent much of my working life trying, in whatever role I held, to make this country fairer, stronger and more successful. I have always believed public service is a privilege. It brings responsibility and scrutiny, but it also brings a meaningful chance to improve people's lives. That is what motivated me in government. The appointment of Mandelson as ambassador was a serious error of judgment. I advised the Prime Minister in support of that appointment, and I was wrong to do so. As I said in my resignation statement, I resigned because I believe responsibility should rest with those who make serious mistakes. Accountability in public life cannot apply only when it is convenient. The Prime Minister relied on my advice, and I got it wrong. It is also important, however, to distinguish between what I did do and what I did not do. What I did do was make a recommendation based on my judgment that Mandelson's experience, relationships and political skills could serve the national interest in Washington at an important moment. That judgment was a mistake. What I did not do was oversee national security vetting, ask officials to ignore procedures, request that steps should be skipped, or communicate explicitly or implicitly that checks should be cleared at all costs. I would never have considered that acceptable. These processes are in place to protect our national security. Finally, I want to place on record my respect for those who serve our country through public institutions, MPs, ministers, civil servants, diplomats, security professionals and many others whose work is demanding, often unseen. In the Cabinet Office, the Foreign Office and 10 Downing Street, there will be many people working long hours now to understand what happened here and to ensure lessons are learned. They deserve fairness and respect as they do that work. Chair, I'm here to assist the committee in its work. I made a serious mistake in recommending Mandelson's appointment. I accept the consequences and hope today I can help the committee to establish the facts and to make sure the right lessons are learned.
Thank you. So why was it necessary to replace Karen Pierce at all?
So, should I set out the timetable of my understanding of the various different decision making? So,
I'm going to do that,
okay,
but I just wondered if I could just start with, how did it even become an issue?
So, my understanding is that before we were in government, the civil service were deciding who to appoint Karen Pierce when her term came to an end, and that in the access talks with Simon Case. Simon Case was informed that the Prime Minister was minded to make a political appointment in the role of ambassador. So that predates my time as a Chief of Staff. At the time, I was working in opposition and I wasn't working as part of the transition team. When I came in as Chief of Staff, I understood that to be the general direction the Prime Minister wanted to go in, and that a formal decision was made not until after the US presidential elections, because he rightly wanted to wait until after seeing who was elected US President on the 5th of November.
So is there a note of the discussion around whether or not it should be a political appointment, or are you saying that it was something that had already been decided before Labour got into government?
So Well, I only found out this weekend as I was trying to piece together the full picture, and I called Simon Case to ask him what his recollection was, and his recollection was that February 2024, when he was inquiring about what Labour might want to do with the US ambassador, as they were considering who to replace Karen Pierce with, he was told the Prime Minister was minded to make a political appointment. As far as I know then, the next decision was taken in early November. So the decision by the Prime Minister was formally taken in early November after the US presidential election. So I've seen a box note that went from the Prime Minister's private office, his foreign policy private office, and his PPS, and which asked him explicitly would he like to go ahead with a political appointment or make a civil service appointment. I don't recall any conversation about that, and then the next thing is that he is requesting who could potentially fill that post.
That's the box note of the 11th of November, which is on page 2 of the humble address materials, and it's a PS note to the Prime Minister.
Yes,
it talks about that the current ambassador to Washington has been making good inroads with the Trump team, and then talks about on timing of appointment and announcement. It's talking about what the options are essentially.
Yes, yeah. And I didn't input into that box note.
No. And neither did anybody else, it looks like. I mean, when it comes to the Prime Minister's comments on it or the Outer Office comments, there wasn't anything on that.
So I don't think there was any input from any of the SPADs into that. It was just a straightforward, what would you like to do, Prime Minister, but there wasn't a recommendation. There
was a list of candidates, David Miliband, Cathy Ashdown, Peter Mandelson, even George Osborne were the sort of names that, according to The Guardian and the Tom Baldwin's book, were the sort of candidates that were being considered at the time. Is that right?
Those sound like the right names to me. I think that I don't recall there being much discussion ahead of the US presidential election. I think the Prime Minister wanted to rightly wait to see the outcome of that. I think if Kamala Harris had won that US presidential election, I don't think that Peter Mandelson would have necessarily been appointed, and he probably wouldn't have been. I think the Prime Minister started to seriously consider names after the US election.
Just so that we get the timeline right, you became head of office on the 6th of October.
Yes.
You really wanted Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador, didn't you?
I thought he was the right choice after the US presidential election. The reason why I thought he was the right choice is because Britain was exposed, the UK was exposed after Brexit. We left the European Union without any US trade deal. And for me, honestly, this was the top priority of the Prime Minister, was to get a US trade deal with the Americans. And I thought that based on Mandelson's experience as an EU Trade Commissioner, that made him the strongest candidate. But like everybody else, I made clear to the Prime Minister there was pros and cons, and there was risks. I don't think the Prime Minister would have chosen Mandelson if Kamala Harris had been elected President. I think he considered about who would be the right fit for the White House, and we procured him a short list of 2 strong candidates at that point.
I'll come on to that in a minute. But I mean, you wanted. I mean, it was more than that. It was personal as well, wasn't it? I mean, he was your mentor, particularly when you became Chief of Staff, because you had no experience of the weird and wonderful world of Whitehall. But obviously Peter Mandelson did. So didn't he become an indispensable and venerated confidant for you?
He was a confidant for me, but I don't confidant. Beg pardon. But I didn't regard him as my mentor. I first had a conversation with Peter Mandelson in 2017. I don't think I really started to go to him for advice until about 2021, and I was 44 years of age then. So I didn't regard him at all as a mentor. I got advice from him, and it was useful. But I also had other people around who were perhaps a bit more shy with the media, who I sought to for advice. We brought in some extremely experienced people from the Blair administration. So Liz Lloyd came into our team, Jonathan Powell came into our team, and I would certainly ask both of those for advice about how things work as well. So I asked a range of people for advice and help. I don't regard Mandelson as ever being a mentor, but certainly as an advisor.
So, I mean, when the New Statesman says that Morgan wouldn't breathe without consulting Peter Mandelson first, that's not fair.
Yeah, you forgive me if I don't believe everything that's written about me in the papers, but I don't think that was true. He was somebody who I sought for advice, but both when I was campaign director and as chief of staff, I built a wide network of people who had done jobs similar to mine in the past, going back decades in the Labour Party.
And I will go into. I mean, I really wanted to just sort of start with. I mean, you began by working for Excalibur, didn't you? Which was run by Peter Mandelson. It was an attack and rebuttal unit, basically, in '97, and you worked on that. And one of the things was to also do work on Labour MPs who might be perceived as disloyal.
So, again, Chair, I'm glad that I can correct some of the records on this, because this is all a bit of a mythos here.
This comes from the Independent.
Yes. So I was an intern at the Labour Party in the 2001 general election. I was an intern. I was assigned to the attack and rebuttal team.
So you didn't work in '97 for Excalibur?
No, I did.
So 2001 was your first time.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And my job. And I hate to dispel the myth to maybe some people from different political parties about what Excalibur was, but all I did was glue bits of newspaper to A4 paper and scan it into a machine. Mm-hmm. It was.
We've all done it.
Literally, that was as sophisticated as my job got. The team wasn't run by Mandelson. The team was run by Spencer Livermore, right. And it included lots of future Labour politicians and SPADs. I never met or spoke to Mandelson in that election, and I didn't even report into who is now Lord Livermore. It was much more junior people that I reported into. And
then what I wanted to ask you about was about the accounts in the I paper on the 4th of February 26, that Mandelson was helping to vet candidates, that he was given access to a secret Google spreadsheet of potential candidates, and that there was an off-the-books exercise. There's quite a lot of detail in the article about it, which tends to give at least an aura of authenticity to such reports.
Mandelson had nothing to do with the selection or the vetting of any of our parliamentary candidates. I don't know what Google Doc the I is referring to. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a party document. I don't think that we kept...
No, I think it was an off-the-books exercise. I think that's the point.
Well, but it had nothing to do with me or the party. I was in a senior role in the party at the time. We did everything on the books. There might have been other people compiling their own lists, but his role had no official impact on the selection of our candidates. Our vetting was done by a team inside HQ, and it was all to do with... it wasn't to do with political vetting. It was to do with inappropriate things they might have said or done prior to becoming candidates. And it was an NEC process to determine the suitability of potential parliamentary candidates. But Mandelson was not involved in the selection of our candidates.
And there was a strategy document called Labour for the Country, which was written, I believe, after the Hartlepool by-election defeat. And is it right that Peter Mandelson had a big input into that? I mean, it's your document, but that he was involved in that too.
So I wrote that document in February 2021 ahead of the local elections to the Prime Minister, because I believed there was challenges the party was facing that it needed to address, and I think Hartlepool showed the scale of the political challenge we had if we wanted to win the next general election, and I certainly asked Mandelson for input into that document. But it was my document, the argument was mine, but I also sent it to half the shadow cabinet. I also sent it to other colleagues, all the senior staff, or most of the senior staff in Lotto at the time. I sent it to, and a document like that where I'm trying to gather my own thoughts, I might send it to 10, 15 people to say, can you give me a view? People from all across the party. But like I said earlier about Mandelson, most of the people who I would go to for advice were much shyer with the media. So you could quite easily put 15 contributors towards a document like that. But it was my document, and it was my argument that I wanted to make to the leader of the party at the time about the direction I thought we needed to take.
After Angela Rayner resigned, and when there was the reshuffle on the 5th of September 2025, it's claimed that Peter Mandelson masterminded the reshuffle In fact, there's a quote, this is not normal. He was US ambassador. Why was he masterminding the reshuffle? This is reported in the Daily Mail. Patrick Maguire says that on the day of the reshuffle, Peter Mandelson was in number 10 and wouldn't leave. And according to the New Statesman, just before his sacking, Mandelson had been in number 10 to advise on the first cabinet reshuffle.
Again, I'm very pleased I get the chance to correct the record on this. Mandelson was in the Cabinet Office and then understood came into number 10 on the day of the reshuffle, but he was not involved in the reshuffle. The reshuffle was extremely challenging because it was a bad day for our party, for the government. We had just lost the Deputy Prime Minister, and we needed to reorganise the government at pace, and the Prime Minister wanted to go ahead and do that. The text messages from Mandelson to me on the day, I believe, will be made available at a humble address. I can't remember precisely what he said, but he texted me his thoughts, and I have to say, on a reshuffle day, I get texted a lot of thoughts from a lot of people. The people who I would respond to and get back to would be cabinet members or other senior staff to ask them their views. I did not respond to any of Mandelson's texts. The text messages set out ideas of people that he thought should be in particular positions. None of his suggestions actually came out to be the case, so his ideas were not followed up. I don't mind getting ideas, but I didn't have a conversation with him about his ideas. He asked me to see me. I don't think I actually bumped into him. I may have done, but I definitely didn't discuss the reshuffle with him. The only text back from me to him is at the end of the day, where I said, look, I thought we did well considering the circumstances today, but I did not take him up on his offers of advice, and I did not act on any of the advice that he gave, and I did not ask him his views on any ministerial appointments.
And so are any of your text messages to Peter Mandelson, or not, going to be available in the humble address?
Yes.
And why is he texting you if you're both at number 10 on the same day?
Because he's not in the room.
And you didn't bump into him?
I might have bumped into him. I don't recall, but I certainly didn't ask him his views. And at the point that he texted me, so the way, and this was my only government reshuffle, there is a big gap between the Prime Minister taking a decision and then the media hearing about it, because we go through a number of processes, especially we have to go to the palace before it's announced publicly to ask the King's permission. So by the time we get to the afternoon, all of the work is done and you're making phone calls, and where the staff move on to is the next day. People text me. I don't like, and they're entitled to do so. I mean, it will be backbench MPs, it'll be ministers, staff members, ex-staff members, journalists, and they will all text me their ideas. Everyone has an idea of how to make.
This is the American. This is the ambassador to the United States of America. He's in number 10 on the day of a reshuffle. I mean, it does look odd. At the very least, will you accept that?
It wasn't a planned reshuffle. If we had all hoped the day before that the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner would get cleared and that we wouldn't have had to do a reshuffle. That was our hope. Had Laurie Magnus gone another way, we wouldn't have had a reshuffle at all. So Mandelson wouldn't have been able to just arrive out of thin air. He happened to be in the Cabinet Office that day, and I don't know why he walked into number 10. But in the room which we were organising the reshuffle, there was the Prime Minister, there was the Chief Whip, I think, came in once he had been appointed new, or maybe he was there the next day, and then there was a handful of his senior staff. Mandelson was not in the room. The Prime Minister did not seek his advice, but as Chief of Staff, on a reshuffle day, and it was true in opposition, I get a lot of text messages from people, and most of them I don't even read. I'll pay attention to the ones I get from cabinet members or from senior staff with their ideas, and most of the rest of them I just filter out, and at the end of the day I go back to them and say thanks for your input. I don't know why he did it, but people do it.
All right, well, let's go back to the appointment of him as ambassador. So there were a number of problems before he could become ambassador to the United States. I mean, the first being that he wanted to be Chancellor of Oxford and ambassador at the same time. So, I mean, he said on a podcast, the Times pod on the 12th of the 11th, 24, that he thought that he could do both jobs. Now, is it right that you asked for official advice on whether or not the role of ambassador to the United States could be part-time?
I don't recall, but I don't recall that I asked if it could be part-time.
So I'm relying in particular on an article in The Observer on the 4th of February 26. Morgan McSweeney sought official advice over whether Peter Mandelson, who resigned from the Lords this week in disgrace, could be the UK ambassador to the US and Chancellor of the University of Oxford at the same time, sources have claimed.
I don't have any recollection of it.
And officials had to explain that being His Majesty's ambassador in Washington was a full-time job in Washington.
So I do remember thinking that at the time, that it was a full-time job. I understood that. So, like I said, at the time that he was doing that, I think that had Kamala Harris won the US presidential elections, I don't think he would have got the job. He was certainly lobbying for the job. He did, but I think that Oxford University shows he was also hedging, because he didn't know whether he was going to get it or didn't think he was going to get it. So he was also looking at other opportunities. He did say to me when he was saying to me that he was interested in the job, that he was also going for Oxford University. And my view to him was these are incompatible. I don't see how you could do both. So
if you're telling him that it's incompatible, then you wouldn't be asking for official advice on whether he could do it part-time?
I don't think I would have, but I can't say for certain if I...
Why wouldn't you remember something like that? I mean, it is pretty interesting.
I can't remember doing so. So I think you're right. I'd remember it if I would have, but I can't remember ever doing so.
Okay. I mean, one of the other problems was that Keir didn't like him. I mean, again, for the New Statesman, Keir doesn't even like him and never really has. He's not Keir's sort of person. And the Foreign Office definitely didn't like him, as far as we can tell. And then, of course, there's all the red flags. So all of these things are problems, getting in the way of Peter Mandelson becoming ambassador. But you still wanted him to be ambassador, right?
At the time in Downing Street, there was conversations about who could be the best candidate, and names were considered, and most people were making pros and cons arguments. I have to say, I know that a lot of people now say they told the Prime Minister they were against it at the time. Everything I know about how the Prime Minister works is he will consult widely, he will take a lot of views on, and if everybody else was opposed to this appointment but me, he would not have made an appointment such as that. He does like to try to build consensus within his team and to get a wide range of views, and he doesn't just listen to one person on it. He certainly spoke to other ministers, other senior staff, and took his time reaching the decision that he reached.
Can I suggest something to you? That you wanted him to be ambassador, and so what you did was you bided your time for the first 6 weeks after your appointment of head of office, and then you went for it. I mean, as Jonathan Powell has said, it was weirdly rushed. I don't think it was rushed at all. What I would suggest is that it was part of a strategy. It's used in warfare, it's used in boxing, it's used in political campaigns. You go fast and you go hard and you confuse your opponents and you get what you want. You appreciate that. I mean, you are an expert in strategy. I mean, that is a strategy that is used sometimes.
That wasn't any strategy that I deployed. When I came in as Chief of Staff, we had big challenges in Downing Street. We had to reset Downing Street. We had a new PPS. One of my priorities was hiring more senior staff into the building because I thought we didn't have enough experience. We had a budget coming up. Most of my time at that time was completely immersed in the budget because I think, from my recollection, we were close to OBR deadlines. These were the kind of things that I was most concerned about, not who the ambassador was. When there wasn't detailed discussions that I remember ahead of the election because we were waiting to see who was going to be elected.
So Trump is elected on the 5th of November.
Yeah.
And what I would suggest is that on the 27th of November, when Mandelson has not been elected as Chancellor for Oxford, it was at that point that matters began. And that you had between the 27th of November and the 4th of December when the due diligence started. So it's very quickly after Mandelson is available as a candidate, we're doing due diligence. And we did due diligence not just for Peter Mandelson, but for another candidate at least as well. Is that right?
Yes.
And then we've got in between the 4th of December of due diligence being done and the 11th of December. And on the 11th of December, according to one of the box notes that we've seen, Mandelson's now the leading candidate. So what happened between the 4th of December and the 11th of December for Mandelson to become the lead candidate? What happened in early December?
So I would disagree a little bit with the sequence of events. Before a consideration was given to who should be the political appointment, the first thing that had to happen was the Prime Minister himself had to decide did he want a political appointment or did he want to go ahead with a civil service appointment. I didn't write into that box note. I think
neither did the Prime Minister.
Well, I can't speak for what he wrote and didn't wrote. I can speak.
You're in charge of his office. There's no note at any stage of, as far as we understand it, unless something, we're about to get something, of the Prime Minister making a decision that he wanted to have a political appointment. There's no note of that, or the thought process in relation to that. And then there's no note, oh, actually, I've now thought about it, I want Peter Mandelson. There's no note from the Prime Minister on that either.
So if I take each one of these decisions separately, the first decision he had to make was did he want a political appointment or not? And I didn't write into that note that I thought that there should be a political appointment. He would have made his decision and he would have told his PPS what he wanted to do, and then his PPS said, now we need to procure candidates. So he could have gone in a different direction at that point, and that would have been the end of it, and we'd have gone ahead with appointing a civil servant as ambassador. So he could have gone in a different direction. I didn't have any strong disagreements with anyone in number 10 that I can recall. Like everyone else, I could see there was pros and cons in the appointment, and I worried that it would go wrong. So I didn't try to push anything through. We procured two strong candidates for him. One was Mandelson and the other was George Osborne, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, who I'd met as part of it. And my view was that we had, and I said to the Prime Minister, you have two appointable candidates. Others agreed that there was two appointable candidates. I can't recall anyone saying that Mandelson was not appointable.
So what happened in early December was that you went to the United States and you went with Jonathan Powell. And as far as I understand it, when you were in the United States, you were given a clear message from the Trump team that actually they weren't keen on Peter Mandelson and that they wanted to have Karen Pierce hanging on. So, did you tell the Prime Minister that? And is there a note of you telling the Prime Minister that?
So it's half right. So
this is Politico, the 20th of the 3rd, 26th.
They didn't talk to me about Mandelson. They made clear that Karen Pierce was doing a wonderful job, and that they would be content with her remaining in post. But I did, as part of the process, talk to Foreign Office officials that I knew, who also approached me directly as well. I spoke to people that I knew in the US system, and I got a wide range of views, and quite a lot of views were coming back in support of Mandelson as a candidate. As I said, if the Prime Minister was hearing overwhelmingly against Mandelson, he might have made another decision. But he was getting a lot of views at the time. He was listening to people. He does listen to his senior staff. He does listen to his ministers before we reach a decision. So I think if it was just me arguing for it, I don't think he'd have made that appointment.
So we've got that, and we've also, of course, got all the stuff that's come out of the due diligence. And on the box note that I've been referring to on the 11th of the 12th, it says, Chief of Staff has discussed candidates with you, with the lead candidate being Peter Mandelson. So here he is, he's now lead candidate. So how did you manage to persuade the Prime Minister that he should be the lead candidate, given what you'd heard in America and given what was in the due diligence?
So What I'd heard in America is mixed views. There were some people I spoke to there that
You've told us that
said that Mandelson was a strong candidate. My view is that he was the lead candidate because of his experience as an EU trade commissioner and the political skills that I thought he could bring to the table.
No, because it's not your opinion that's important. It's the Chief of Staff has discussed candidates with you, with the lead candidate being Peter Mandelson. I mean, this is supposed to be the Prime Minister's decision, not your decision.
Yes. It's the Prime Minister's decision.
And the Chief of Staff has discussed Peter's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which we will go through with you, but your Director of Communications is satisfied with his responses to questions about contact. Do you think it's appropriate, when doing due diligence, for you as a friend of Peter Mandelson to speak to the Prime Minister, and for his responses to be measured by another friend of Peter Mandelson, Matthew Doyle? And for that information to be put before the Prime Minister as a basis upon which they can make a decision?
So I agree, and I think that when I look back on it, I certainly think it would have been much better if I'd asked Pet to ask those follow-up questions. I guess my thinking at the time was I'd put follow-up questions to him in writing, and that if a senior member of staff did that he would feel more obligated to give the truth and the full truth. I didn't feel that I got that back from him. But it wasn't my decision, it was the Prime Minister's decision, and he saw the DV as part of that decision.
And so between the 11th of December, when Mandelson's the lead candidate, and writing to the King and telling the King that, advising the King that this should be the candidate, what happens? Is there a decision made at that point that Peter Mandelson should be the ambassador, and where is the note to show that the decision was made and how the decision was made?
So I tried to get the times as best as I possibly could and dates, but you have to forgive me a bit because I don't have access to my number 10 diary or the Prime Minister's diary. So if I make a mistake, it's not intentional.
No, it's fine.
So I'll try to give you as best as I can. So I think three things worth saying. The Prime Minister will be talking to people at that time, saying, what do you think? Everyone will be giving him pros and cons. That's for sure. He will take a view based on a rounded view. Then the last meeting I recall, where he said, this is the direction I want to go in, was with an independent Jonathan Powell and me and him. And then after that, and it might have been the same day or the day before, is when an independent wrote to Philip Barton to say the Prime Minister would like to make a political decision. So that was the last meeting that he had, and in that meeting he would have conducted that meeting the way he always does, which is to make sure everyone in the room has their view. And then
what date did you say this was? I've missed it.
This would have been either on the day or the day before, or a few days before. An independent wrote officially to Philip Barton. So when an independent wrote to Philip Barton to say, can we begin the necessary arrangements and get Mandelson in place?
We're talking like 15th, 16th,
something
18th,
about that.
17th, 18th.
Yeah. So he would have had a meeting then. He would have said, right, what are we going to do here? Let me get your views. Okay. And then he'd have said, we're going to go with Mandelson.
Okay. During those 7 days, was there an agreement between the Prime Minister, between you, that what you should do is tell the King, tell the incoming President, announce the fanfare, but all of it always knowing that it would depend on his vetting? And would it be whether it was so during when this meeting was happening? Is it like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this, but obviously it's all dependent on vetting?
So I wasn't involved in any decisions about when to tell the King. I'm not aware of those processes or when the appropriate time to talk to the King or communicate with the King about all of this. I don't think that we discussed that at the time, and I know Simon Case's letter has come out subsequently. I didn't see Simon Case's letter at the time, or I don't recall seeing it. I think it was directly to the Prime Minister rather than to me.
But it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you can't appoint somebody, let alone Peter Mandelson, without vetting him first.
So it didn't jump out as a problem to me at the time.
Even after the due diligence?
even after the due diligence. And the reason why it didn't jump out to me, we had around about the same time, again, I can't remember the dates, around about the same time, we made a political appointment for National Security Advisor in Jonathan Powell. And as far as I remember, we appointed him, and then we began the DV. I was appointed before I began the DV work, and that's what tends to happen. If he had then failed, then we wouldn't have sent him to DC. So it didn't occur to me to ask, because that's how I saw the practices being put in place. I think the Prime Minister is right in saying that shouldn't happen, and I think that he's now made a decision that won't happen again in the future. But there has
As a strategy man, don't you think it's a bit odd? Let's at least look at it this way. It's a bit odd to, essentially, what you've done is you've briefed the press, you've told the King, you've told the incoming President, he started being paid, he's got his pass, all of these sort of things have happened, and then you do the due diligence. So at that point, due diligence had said, no, sorry, really, too risky, can't do this, and he'd... Imagine the storm.
Sorry, no, due diligence had been done. DV.
Sorry.
DV.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So yeah, it would have been very embarrassing for us. But can I just play an alternative kind of scenario? So at the time, it didn't jump out to me as a problem. We appointed, as I said, I got appointed before I completed all my necessary work. Jonathan Powell got appointed too before the necessary work. If Mandelson's DV had been a problem, it would have been an embarrassment for us. It would have been a much bigger problem for him. But there's an alternative scenario, which is that we had, say, we're going to do DV before we talk to the palace or before we talk to the US administration. The chances of, unfortunately, the chances in government of there being a leak anyway would have been a problem. Either way, if your lead candidate fails DV, it is embarrassing, but it's far preferable to pull that candidate at that point than to go any further. If that happens to your candidate and your candidate blows up and you have to pull them out, that's what happens. It's embarrassing to us. It would have been worse for him. But at the time, nobody said to me, hang on, before you announce anything at all, make sure that we do this DV first. Of course, if somebody had, I wouldn't have questioned it. I would have, but
at the time, the agenda was that he is offered the job on the 20th, and he's supposed to be in Washington on the 20th of January. So that's just a month, and during that month, there's Christmas and there's New Year. I mean, all I'm suggesting is that this was part of a deliberate strategy to push this as fast as it could be in order to ensure that people could not raise any objections in the circumstances, because there simply wasn't time.
No, I don't agree with that at all. If there was problems with his DV, we'd have pulled them. If we'd been told that he couldn't get the necessary security clearance, I've no doubt the Prime Minister would have pulled them. I mean, in the event the Foreign Office couldn't complete the work until after the inauguration, but the timetable was being set by the US political calendar. We wanted to wait until after the US presidential election to work out who the candidate should be, and we did want the candidate in place by the inauguration. But it wasn't a big deal that he wasn't in place by the inauguration. He was in place, I think it was about 2-3 weeks later.
So this is my last question. So do you think that when the chance came for you to give Peter Mandelson his last job, you stopped thinking about what was best for the government? Really, you stopped thinking about what was best for the country, and you just thought, I want to give this job, this great job, to one of my heroes, and it became an obsession. And it may be that the Prime Minister can be criticised for giving you this leeway, but it was a leeway that you abused. And you stopped thinking strategically. You closed your eyes to the risks. You didn't consult the necessary people, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary. You railroaded this through as fast as you could before anyone could realise what had hit them.
I don't think that's true. I certainly spoke to the Foreign Secretary a number of times. Then Foreign Secretary. I have a very good relationship with the Deputy Prime Minister. I've known him for very, very many years. And I would certainly have spoken to him extensively at the time. I don't regard Mandelson as a hero. I think that's an exaggeration of the kind of relationship that I had with him. In every advice that I gave to the Prime Minister. Hand on heart, I thought I was operating with a motive in the national interest. In politics, you over decades, you know a lot of people. I've had to, in 20 years in politics, I've had to fire friends from jobs. I've had to turn people down who were desperate for jobs, who were closer friends of mine than Mandelson's, who really wanted jobs in Number 10, or people who thought they were going to be ministers, because I've always tried to operate in national interest. The amount of times I've had friends come and see me or phone me who were really angry at me because they didn't get the job that they wanted to get. That's what politics is. You have to try and always operate in the national interests. Of course, you know people, and then you make judgments that in this case turned out to be wrong, incorrectly. I completely accept that, but it was this was not some hero I was trying to get a job for. I thought that his skills as an EU Commissioner would help us to get the trade deal that I think the country needed, because we were very, very exposed after Brexit, and getting that trade deal right was very important. I thought he had the skills to do it. I made the wrong judgment. I completely accept that, but my motive was always in the national interest.
Afri, you want to do a follow-up, and then I'm going to Sir John. Is that right?
I had a few follow-ups.
Oh, well, I'll go to Sir John first, and then I'll go to you, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just be clear? The Prime Minister had decided that he wished to make a political appointment. Was it you who first said, Prime Minister, I've got the perfect candidate, Peter Mandelson?
I think the first person who put Mandelson's name forward was Mandelson.
Directly to the Prime Minister, I want the job? Or
I think he talked, I don't know if he spoke to him. I think he talked to a lot of people, making it clear that he was interested in the job, including, I'm sure, possibly even members of the press. But yeah, that's where that came from. I don't remember the Prime Minister asking me a view prior to the US election. I think, but I can't remember, but I think he was keeping his cards close to his chest, waiting to see the outcome of that election. And I think there would have been, for a Labour administration, a broader range of candidates available to him had the Democrats won that election.
You've set out why you think he was well qualified to do the job, but you've also known him for a very long time, and you will also be fully aware of the fact that he had twice had to resign from the cabinet, that he had business interests with China, that he had a close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, and also that he was friends with Oleg Deripaska, who was a confidant of Vladimir Putin. Despite all those things, you still thought he was the right person for the job?
Well, to take each one of those in turn, after his last resignation, he had rebuilt a reasonable reputation for himself. He had gone as an EU Commissioner, and as far as I was aware at the time of his appointment, and I don't know what will subsequently come of their own investigations, but he had a good reputation. He was seen to have done a good job as EU Commissioner. Then he came back into British politics and served as a very senior member of Gordon Brown's premiership, Gordon Brown's government, and again at the time was well regarded as a senior minister in that department. So he had done these two big political jobs long after his last resignation. It's why I think that a lot of the media and a lot of other politicians at the time thought that this was the right appointment for the country. The nature of the relationship that I understood he had with Epstein was not a close friendship. How I understood it at the time was a passing acquaintance that he regretted having and that he apologised for. What has emerged since then was way, way, way worse than I had expected at the time. And it was when I saw the pictures, when I saw the Bloomberg questions in September 2025, I have to say it was like a knife through my soul. I did not expect that level of connection that he was talking about there. As for the other issues that you're raising, I thought business interests would be dealt with in the Foreign Office, so people look at things like conflict of interests. When we appointed SPADs who have business interests, Cabinet Office and PET would deal with that, so that wouldn't be something I would deal with as a Chief of Staff. And if there was any national security issues whatsoever, then that my assumption on that was that would be dealt with by DV, and if there was any national security issues whatsoever, we would then be told if there was a problem, and then the Prime Minister could pull the appointment. So from what I knew at the time, I thought he had re-established himself as a credible political senior political figure in Europe and in the Brown government. I did not was aware of the extent of the relationship that he had, and I thought that these other issues would be dealt with at other parts of the process.
Your discovery of the closeness of his relationship, you say, was a knife to the heart. But the box note says that you discussed with Peter Mandelson his relationship with Epstein, and that you then discovered as a result of that conversation, for instance, the fact that he stayed in the flat belonging to Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein had been convicted for paedophile offences.
That wasn't a discovery that I made.
Did you advise the Prime Minister of that?
No, that was in the DV form that was from
DV?
So, no, beg pardon, you're right, a due diligence form from PET. I wrote to Mandelson after the DD to understand from him in writing what his position was on these issues. That email that I sent to Mandelson and his responses from that, the Met Police are using as part of their investigation. When I was in number 10, I was told that we couldn't share either the questions or the answers to those questions or the email itself with the media or as part of the humble address process until the police were finished with it, because they said it would interfere with their investigation. And so I've stuck to that since I've left Downing Street too.
But in your conversation with the Prime Minister about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Epstein, the subject of Mandelson staying in Epstein's flat after the conviction, that was part of the conversation.
It's hard to answer that directly without saying what was in the contents of the emails. But my understanding at the time, I could maybe say about what my understanding was from hearing him talk about it and listening to his friends. My understanding at the time was that his relationship was a passing acquaintance that he knew through somebody else, that he's the way of he's describing it was that he realised that it was a mistake, he deeply regretted it, he broke it off many years before. He wasn't advocating for the guy or defending the guy in any way, and you take all of these things into consideration. What then emerged as the relationship in September last year was not the relationship that I was led to understand. It was very different.
Can I ask about the two notes that went to the Prime Minister from the private office about the appointment? In each case, they've been released under the humble address process. They are completely blank other than the submission. There is no comment. The Prime Minister has not indicated any view. Now, I've worked in Downing Street, and box notes go up and they come back down with a comment. It may only be a tick, but there is something to indicate that the Prime Minister has taken a decision. In this case, there is nothing to indicate that the Prime Minister has taken a decision. Why not?
I can't answer the question. So the box notes usually come back into the civil service, and then I get informed what the decision is. He may, and sometimes he did do it verbally, but I can't answer why there wasn't anything in the box. So I would make submissions into the box the same as the other special advisors. They would be collated by his PPS, then they would go to the Prime Minister, and then the Prime Minister would send it back through the system. I didn't ask to see the box note. I would sometimes ask to see a box note if I was unsure what the decision was, or if I wanted to understand a bit more about his thinking. But generally speaking, I just took whatever the civil service said. But I don't know why he didn't tick. Maybe he spoke to his team.
Well, that's the alternative, that he didn't indicate in writing. He said, I would like to have a meeting to discuss this. But if such a meeting took place, there would be a record of it, and there is no record that has been released.
Again, I can't answer as to why that was. I wasn't the person who was keeping records. But in terms of his decisions, I would always make sure, in any decision, including any of this, that the PPS would always be present to be able to give reviews and to make sure decisions were properly recorded. But I wasn't the minute taker. I wasn't.
So how did you discover that the Prime Minister had decided to go ahead with Peter Mandelson?
I believe that, from my best recollection, that there was a meeting in mid-December, and he told us that that's what he wanted to do, and then Nin Pandit took his decision and passed that on to Philip Barton.
So a meeting took place, which led to the Private Secretary writing to say that that was the decision. Is there a record of that meeting?
I don't know. I don't have access to that information anymore.
It's just your job to make sure that minutes are taken of meetings.
No.
No. So you're in charge of his office, but you're not in charge of there being any records made of any decisions made in the office.
No, the civil service will take responsibility for that side of things. My job was to make sure that he had the political input. When I was in meetings, private secretaries would take notes. How those notes were recorded and circulated, I didn't ask around the detail of it. I just always assumed that they would be properly recorded and shared with the appropriate people.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back over some of the questions that the Chair had asked you and just ask some follow-ups and seek some clarification on some of those. You said that you were out in the States at the start of December prior to the appointment being made. When you were out there, in the conversations that you were having kind of offline, did anyone raise with you concerns that they had about Mandelson's business links with China?
No.
Okay. So thinking about the security vetting, we heard from Sir Philip Barton that he told us there was no contingency plan in place if security clearance wasn't granted to Peter Mandelson. Had you considered the possibility that clearance would be denied, and had you put any contingency plan in place?
I didn't have a contingency plan in place, but I was always aware that somebody could fail security vetting. Was always aware that that was a possibility for any appointment that we made, yes.
Aware, but did you consider it? Did you kind of actively think this could happen in this case?
No, and if it had happened, we'd have withdrawn the ambassadorship. It would have been a political embarrassment, and then we'd have gone on with probably it's hard to guess. We'd have asked Karen Pierce, I think, to stay on probably, and then we'd have thought about what would be the next steps.
You clearly felt that Peter Mandelson was the right person for the job. You'd recommended him to the Prime Minister, although you have said that you believe the Prime Minister would have sought a wide range of opinions. Despite the fact that you ultimately resigned over your advice to the Prime Minister, would you say that he was the person in full knowledge of all of the information who made the decision to appoint Mandelson to that role?
He had all the knowledge that I had, but I don't know what other knowledge, and this is part of what this committee is looking at, what he should have otherwise have been told or not told, but he had all the knowledge that I had, yes. And
that he was the one who ultimately will have made the decision, not being persuaded or kind of doing what somebody else wanted him to do?
Yes, the Prime Minister takes the decision, yes.
Okay. So Sir Oliver Robbins, who obviously is the former Permanent Under-Secretary at the Foreign Office, he has now lost his job. And the PM said when he was asked that he didn't accept the explanation as to why he overruled the verdict of security vetters, and that's why he sacked him. Do you think somebody should be sacked for an error of judgment?
Sorry, if I could add one last thing to your previous question, if that's okay, which is that the Prime Minister was aware of everything that I was aware of, but the Prime Minister wasn't aware of enough, not because of advisors or civil servants, because Mandelson himself wasn't open enough with him. And that really is the big problem in all of this. Had Mandelson said this is everything and defended himself on the truth, I don't think that he'd have come close to being appointed. So the Prime Minister did not have enough information because Mandelson did not share the necessary information with him. He had ample opportunity to do so and did not. And that is where, above all else, that is where this was let down. If he had been honest, like any other person, and the thing that I always thought about Mandelson was I thought he cared about his party and he loved his country. So I banked that he would at least be honest with his Prime Minister in such a post, and I think that's where really it was let down. So I don't think that the Prime Minister had all the necessary information to make the decision. Sorry, I've now forgot your next question. Beg your pardon.
That's okay. And thank you for your answer on that. I must say it appeared to me that there was a significant amount of information that had come forward in the due diligence, but I think there may be some questions from others on that, so I won't push on that now. My question was about Sir Oliver Robbins and the decision by the Prime Minister to sack him. And I wanted to know, given the reasoning that the Prime Minister gave in the Chamber, do you think that someone should be sacked for an error of judgment?
I can't really comment on what happened with Oliver Robbins. Sir Ollie, I had left Downing Street at the time, but I know how the Prime Minister works, and I think whatever decision he takes, he will always have been weighing up everything, including listening to people. But I can't really comment on that decision because I left Downing Street at the time.
So you think that he will have sought sufficient information that he wouldn't have needed to carry out a fuller investigation, but perhaps suspending him rather than immediately sacking him from the job?
I can't say what he did and didn't do because it was after my time in Downing Street, so I'm not privy to any of this information. But how the Prime Minister works, yes, I think he'd have got the necessary information before reaching a conclusion.
And I just wanted to check, because you talked about the process that Jonathan Powell had gone through, as far as you understood, in terms of going through developed vetting before he took up the political appointment of being National Security Advisor. But I understand prior to that he was already a special envoy for the British Indian Ocean Territory. Would he not have had developed vetting in that role?
I don't know.
Okay. And just wanted to ask you a couple of final questions in relation to Matthew Doyle. We heard from Sir Oliver Robbins that the Prime Minister had inquired, as I'm sure you're aware, about a diplomatic role for Matthew Doyle. Why do you think that the Prime Minister didn't want David Lammy, who was the Foreign Secretary at the time, to be told about that request and those inquiries?
So it was what was happening at the time was it was clear that Matthew Doyle's time in government was coming to an end. And the Prime Minister wanted me as part of that to discuss with Matthew Doyle next steps, because these are difficult conversations. And the Prime Minister wanted me to convey to him that if he had wanted to stay in government, that he should consider doing so because he had extensive experience in government. The private office asked what vacancies that Matthew Doyle might apply for. There was no suggestion at any point that he would be imposed in. If he had wanted to work in the Foreign Office, Matthew Doyle would have had to apply for any of those posts the same as anybody else. The reason why, I'm sure, but it wasn't my email, but the reason why I'm sure the private office said, please don't discuss this with anyone, including the Foreign Secretary, is because it was a delicate HR issue. Somebody's leaving their job. You don't want a lot of people knowing it. In the event, it wasn't something that was taken very seriously. It was as Matthew Doyle was leaving, and I'm having that conversation with him. People don't really engage in that conversation because it's a tough thing. And I'm saying, look, and I would have said to him, there are jobs coming up in the Foreign Office you might be interested in, such as these kind of things. But he didn't actually engage in that. He didn't seek to apply in any of that. He said he wasn't interested in any of that. He was in the senior job as Director of Communications. My understanding at the time was that it wasn't unprecedented for SPADs to apply for and get foreign policy jobs, such as Ed Llewellyn under the previous Conservative government, but it wasn't something that we talked about a great deal. He didn't apply for any jobs, but for reassurance, he would have had to apply the same as anyone else. And had he said he wanted to apply, absolutely at that point the Foreign Secretary would have been involved in that conversation. But the reason why the private office didn't want it shared around was because it was a sensitive issue for exiting somebody from their job.
If your answer is that he would have to apply in answer to an advert, like anyone else, like Equal Opportunities policy says, then why does anybody need to ring anybody else up?
Well, because the Prime Minister wanted to say to Matthew Doyle, look, you've done a good job, but we have to change the direction that we're going in comms. There's other jobs coming up. It was more about a kind of softer landing. There was no suggestion in any conversation that anyone had with me that there was a desire to impose him into any job. All I said to him when he was leaving was, look, there's these jobs coming up, would you be interested in them? But he wasn't. So that was the end of the conversation. And the only reason to keep the circle of people knowing limited was because it was a HR issue, and we just don't want to have those wider discussions. We want to have those discussions with as few people as possible. But I don't think this was a big conversation with anyone. I think it was all very, the Prime Minister saying, look, can you have this with him? Well, he wanted to, I mean, they are difficult conversations. He wanted Matthew Doyle to be able to land on his feet somewhere, and he wanted to encourage him to apply for the next thing. And then part of that is telling to people, look, there is time to move on, but there are other opportunities out there.
So, I mean, you say it wasn't a big conversation, but obviously it went to the head of the diplomatic service, so that's quite a senior conversation to be having. You, in your answer, you say that you believe it was not told to David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary at the time, because it was a sensitive HR issue. Are you aware of any other discussions between Number 10 and the Foreign Office, the Permanent Under-Secretary, whether it was Sir Oliver Robbins or Sir Philip Barton, in which the Prime Minister on Number 10 asked for the Foreign Secretary not to be involved in the discussion?
No.
And would you say, how involved would you say that the Foreign Secretary was at the time in that decision to appoint Mandelson as the ambassador?
He certainly would have had several conversations with the Prime Minister. I had conversations with him. I don't know who else he had conversations with.
He was fine about it, wasn't he?
Nobody was fine about it. Everyone could see that there was risks, and like everybody else, he would have flagged that there are risks. And I don't want to share with the committee what conclusions people came to, because I think it's for other people to say.
You were there. I mean, you were there. There's no notes, you know. So we're just trying to understand how these decisions are made. We've got the Foreign Secretary. Here he is at a meeting. We're discussing whether or not Britain should send Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. I don't see what's wrong with you telling us whether the Prime Minister, whether the Foreign Secretary thought it was a good idea or not.
Because I can't remember precisely what people said, and like.
Don't tell us word for word. Just
okay.
Like, did he say, "Okay, yes, let's do it," or did he say, "Actually, I've got reservations"?
Like everybody else, he could see that there was cons and risks, and like everybody else, he would have seen. I had reservations too. Like everybody else, he would have had reservations. He'd have discussed them iteratively with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister would have taken the Foreign Secretary's views very seriously. He is somebody who he's close to politically. He obviously appointed him afterwards as Deputy Prime Minister in that reshuffle you were asking about earlier. So he was somebody who he was the then Foreign Secretary. I'm getting the terms right. The current Deputy Prime Minister is somebody who the Prime Minister is close to, would have got his views. He would have also got his views of senior staff and other ministers. And the Prime Minister would not have dismissed any of those people's views, and would have taken them in the round before making a final decision.
Okay, let me try one more time.
Sorry.
Did the Foreign Secretary say, "I think this is a bad idea"?
Not to me.
Okay. Edward.
I just wanted to go back quickly to your presentation of the conversation with Matthew Doyle, that in fact, if there were upcoming posts, ambassadorial posts in the Foreign Office, then he should consider applying for them. Can you see how, if you were Matthew Doyle and you'd just seen the Prime Minister ram Peter Mandelson down the throat of the FCDO despite all of the obvious problems, that might feel like a job offer, even if it was how you characterised it? You surely would be sitting there going, that seems like a pretty locked-on job if I wanted.
I don't think that the Prime Minister conducted himself in the way that you were suggesting. He was told by the Cabinet Secretary that he was allowed to make a political appointment, and he made his political decision about who he thought the candidate should be. It's then for the machine to implement the Prime Minister's decision. Sorry, and certainly not the way I would have put it to Matthew Doyle when he was leaving. I would not have said, and I would not have needed to say it. This was
you wouldn't have, because you would have been sitting there going, well, if I want the job, I'm definitely going to get it, because the Prime Minister didn't get Peter Mandelson one.
Certainly not. No. I certainly don't agree with that. This was about a duty of care to somebody who was leaving, and saying to them there are other opportunities out there. In the end, he didn't ask for any follow-up on that, but I would not have said to him, we're going to move you from this to this, or whatever job you want is yours. Certainly would not have said that to him, and it was the same when other people were leaving too. You would say to him, look, there might be other opportunities in the future. But
have you heard the phrase "jobs for the boys"? I mean, this is so far from any equal opportunities policies that I've ever heard of. I mean, don't you think this is a little odd or shameful?
Well, the same was true if we had to exit senior women from the team as well. We'd have said to them, if you want to stay in government, and some did. But Matthew Doyle would have had. I don't want to.
I'm just saying, talking about senior women. I mean, what job was she given, for example?
Some of the regions.
So, Sue Gray's now in the House of Lords, but this isn't about. He wasn't promised a job, and had he applied for the job, then the Foreign Office would have considered his application the same as anyone else, and the equalities and all of the other necessary procedures would have had to follow in any direction. So he was.
Sorry, Mr. McSweeney, that is not what Sir Ollie Robbins told us. Sir Ollie Robbins told us that Matthew Doyle's name was another one that was floated as a political appointee, which, given that when the Prime Minister politically appointed Mandelson, it was a lock, it would be fair to assume, if you're Matthew Doyle, that effectively the similar guarantee was being made to him.
I wasn't asked to. I didn't send that email to him. It was the opposite, though, of jobs for boys. He was losing his job, and all I said to him was there might be other opportunities. It was never followed up, and I was not told by anybody, not by the Prime Minister or the private office, you need to go and promise him a job. It was just a simple duty of care conversation. You're leaving the job. There are other opportunities in the future. Do you want to explore them? And it was no, and that was the end of the conversation.
Thank you, Chair. I want to take us back to a couple of questions that the Chair asked earlier in relation to Matthew Doyle. So on the 11th of December, the note to the Prime Minister, Director of Communications is recorded as saying that he was satisfied with his responses to questions about contact with Epstein. Matthew Doyle was the Director of Communications. Did you trust his judgment, given what we know about Matthew Doyle?
Trust his judgment, given what we know, beg your pardon.
Do you trust Matthew Doyle's judgment in relation to that particular, that he was satisfied with his responses to questions in relation to his contact, Mandelson's contact with Epstein?
So Matthew Doyle submitted his view into the Prime Minister, and it would be for the Prime Minister to decide whether he took that view on board or decided not to take the view on board. In terms of what I did, was I gave the answers or ran through the answers with the Prime Minister, but I didn't put a lot of weight on my own judgment on what Matthew Doyle thought at the time.
Okay, so there was a fact-finding call between the General Counsel to the Prime Minister and Matthew Doyle, where he's reflecting back on some of the conversations there. It's noted there that Lord Mendelssohn is a personal friend of Matthew Doyle, and that he had a number of conversations with yourself, many of which were one-to-one, and there was quite a lot of back and forth, which was resulted in 3 specific questions. What were those 3 specific questions?
So they were all questions that came from wanting clarification around the due diligence report, and on the point of who should have been asking him those questions. It's my view now that we should have asked PET to ask those questions.
What were the themes of those 3 questions?
So they were questions in relation to the due diligence reports, but they are questions that the police have now got that email, and so does the government, and so does Number 10. But they've asked for, at the time I was in Number 10, I was told that the police did not want these questions or their answers released. They will be released as part of the as part of the humble address process, but when the police are finished with it. So until then, I don't feel that I can say what the questions were.
Okay, and do you think that given the scale of the appointment that 3 questions were sufficient enough to interrogate Mendelssohn?
I think if somebody is being honest with you, then the questions would have been sufficient. If somebody's hiding, then whether you ask 3 or 5, if they're deliberately hiding something, or however many questions it might have been, then I'm not sure you got to the bottom of it. For purposes of appearances, and public appearances are important in this, I wish and I regret that I didn't ask PET to carry out those questions. But I'm not sure that they'd have got better answers given how he was choosing to answer these questions. I'm not sure they'd have got better answers at all. However, my hope at the time, was that, my thinking at the time at least was that I'll ask him these questions and he should answer them honestly. If he doesn't answer them honestly, I don't have investigatory powers, and neither would PET. But there was 2 other mechanisms that I thought might catch a problem. One was he had been such a public figure for so long and had media scrutiny, actually worked for the media, that if there was anything where he had said something to me that that the media later uncovered, then there would be gaps. I also thought that DV would expose if there was any further risks. So I thought those were the other next steps where there was some safeguards in place. But if somebody isn't fully truthful about the questions they answer, then if there was a different person asking it, or if they'd asked more questions, I'm not sure. It's hard to tell. We don't know. But with hindsight, I wish that I had asked PET to ask those questions.
Did you put those questions in writing?
Yeah.
Is your evidence that you put those questions in writing because you thought Mendelssohn was more obligated to tell the truth if he had to write it down?
Yeah, and I had a record as well.
So does that mean that you advised the Prime Minister that you didn't think that Mendelssohn had told you the full truth about Epstein?
No, I didn't say that to him.
What did you say? Well, you say that the Prime Minister thought, well, if there's a serious problem, the DV will pick it up.
No, I didn't say there's a serious problem. The DV will pick it up. No.
No, but I mean, either you thought that Mendelssohn was lying to you about Epstein, and presumably you told the Prime Minister that, or you thought, well, or the Prime Minister thought, well, okay, he's lied, but let's make sure, but the DV will pick it up, so that'll cover us at that point.
No, I thought he had told the truth. I thought if he had written to me and set it out the way he did, that he'd have told the truth. That was a mistake.
Right, so he'd lied before and then he told the truth when he wrote it.
I thought no, I didn't think he had lied. I thought he had told the truth. And I thought, and that was the basis of which I thought we were going ahead. But I also thought, if I was wrong, if he had been lying, I thought he told the truth, and that's why I thought we should proceed. But I thought if I was wrong, and he had been lying, that might be picked up at DV.
And whatever he wrote, he essentially assured you that it was that any allegations about him staying at Epstein's house once Epstein was in jail was all fine.
Again, I don't think I can share the contents of the emails and the questions and his answers, but when he wrote back to me, I assumed wrongly that he was telling me the truth.
Okay, so going on to another fact-finding call, this time with Jonathan Powell, he's recorded as saying that he raised concerns directly with yourself in relation to the reputation of Mandelson. You responded back to him saying that the issues had been addressed. What issues had been addressed?
I don't recall that conversation. Like everyone else, Jonathan Powell was saying that there was pros and cons, but I don't recall that conversation.
You don't recall any issues being addressed? No. Okay. So I'll take us now to areas of conflict of interest in the due diligence checklist. So you said earlier that nothing jumped out at the due diligence stage and that you weren't aware of the extent of the problem. Did you look at the due diligence checklist in detail that was provided?
So things jumped out as a problem, but nothing jumped out as made a problem in the regards that we hadn't done the DV yet. So I assumed the DV process would happen following the Prime Minister's decision. It didn't jump out at me that it was public, that that's who the Prime Minister's preferred candidate was before we did the DV. On regards conflict of interests, my assumption was that would be picked up with the Foreign Office when he was being employed, because when we had SPADs appointed who had business interests, that would be picked up by the Cabinet Office and not dealt with at a political level.
Okay, so in the due diligence checklist under professional financial relationships, it says that the retained role and interest in Global Counsel would have to cease, come to an end. Did you make sure that that took place, or at any point did you question that?
I left all that to the Foreign Office because that's not my skill set or expertise. I wouldn't know how to even manage that.
Okay, and then in relation to reputational risks, so again, earlier you referenced that nothing jumped out at the due diligence stage. Did you have the chance to read the 2019 report commissioned by JP Morgan?
Sorry, just again, it did jump out at me this was a problem. What didn't jump out as a problem was that we had yet to do DV. So I can't recall reading it, no, but I recall thinking this is a problem and we need to ask some follow-up questions.
Okay, so questions were asked in relation to the JP Morgan report, but not enough to cause serious concern.
It wasn't the volume of questions. I don't think that was a problem. It was the nature of the answers and the lack of honesty.
Did you see, have you read the emails between Mandelson and Epstein in the JP Morgan report?
I can't recall reading them.
Okay, I will reference some of them where Epstein says, was PT helpful? These are all in the public domain and were from 2019. Was PT helpful in relation to the intention to sell a government asset? Epstein emailing Mandelson saying, I like to see my suggestions come to fruition. In 2010, Mandelson shares the guest list for an event he's speaking at in Shanghai. Another email from 2010, Mandelson emails about Russian businesses. Were none of these emails brought to your attention as a serious red flag? No. Okay. So if these were not part of the due diligence process, did the Prime Minister have any understanding of the depth of concern that was raised in the report, the JP Morgan report?
So he read the due diligence file. I don't know precisely what his overall views on it were.
Nobody thought to bring it to the Prime Minister as well, the content of the report?
Other than what I think he saw, I'm not that I know.
Think that was a failing of your role as the Chief of Staff to bring it to the Prime Minister?
I think that I would have expected due diligence to produce all the content that was available out there, and not for me to run a parallel process to look for other due diligence. So I didn't add my own further investigation to it.
It was all in the public domain, so this is everything that the general public would have known. So this was not serious enough to require you to, first of all, look into the evidence, and secondly, report it to the Prime Minister.
I didn't carry out any further investigations, and I think, looking back on it, I think that the DD process was surprisingly inadequate to me. We had not, so when we came in to government, we had introduced adding DD to appointments of SPADs, special advisors, which wasn't there before. We started to use other SPADs to do it because the process, I think, wasn't good enough, generally speaking, and this report, I think, was insufficient. And should I have asked further questions of the report compiling team, then I think that's fair. I think I should have.
And final question from me. You said it was wrong to appoint Mandelson. Why is it wrong now, but it was right back then?
I think the reason why I thought it was right then was because of his experience as an EU commissioner. I think what came out in September last year with the Bloomberg emails, I think the pictures and later revelations from the Epstein files shows that the nature of the relationship that he had meant that he was unfit for the job.
I want to have another go at an answer that you gave, because I do feel as though you've contradicted it. I mean, I've got a note now. So my thinking at the time was that I'd put follow-up questions to him in writing, and that if a senior member of staff did that he would feel more obligated to give the truth and the full truth. I didn't feel that I got that back from him. But it wasn't my decision. It was the Prime Minister's decision. And he saw the DV as part of that decision.
Sorry, let me correct myself. In September, I realised I didn't get the truth back from him. At the time, I thought I got the truth back from him. When I saw the emails and the pictures that came out and that were published from the Epstein files in September last year, that's when it really dawned on me that I did not get the full truth from him then. At the time, I thought he was telling the truth. If I didn't think he was telling the truth, I would have said, this guy is not telling the truth, but I did think he was telling the truth, and that was wrong.
So I didn't feel that I got that back from him, but it wasn't my decision, it was the Prime Minister's. You didn't mean any of that?
No, I didn't feel that I got the truth back from him in September last year. Sorry, I might have mumbled my words. I got the answers back from him. I thought that he was telling the truth. And when I gave that to the Prime Minister, I did so on the basis that Mandelson had answered truthfully. That was in January, or December, beg your pardon. And in September last year, it became clear to me that he hadn't told the truth.
Edward.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if we're going over the same point here, but for the point of clarity, the due diligence report is produced by the Cabinet Office. You received that. Did the Prime Minister receive the full unredacted due diligence report, or did you summarise it, or did you brief him orally? What did the Prime Minister receive?
We received the full report.
You received the full report. And did you discuss the contents of the report with him?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And during that conversation happened at a point at which he had read the report, or there's a difference between receiving the report and reading it, I guess?
Yes, he would have read the report. He read all these papers.
Okay. Did he raise any reservations with you during that discussion?
I can't remember particularly which ones, if he did.
You wrote some clarification emails to Peter Mandelson, received those replies. Did those responses go to the Prime Minister?
Yes.
And did you discuss those responses with him?
Yes, we would have discussed those responses with him, and again, he would have considered them in a round.
Okay. So he didn't. Did he express any reservations at that point about the appointment of Peter Mandelson?
I can't remember what he said.
You've talked about there being pros and cons to the appointment of Peter Mandelson. When you said you spoke to Jonathan Powell, you said that he raised pros and cons. When you spoke to David Lammy, he raised pros and cons. I'm just wondering, outside of Peter Mandelson himself, is there anyone who wasn't raising any cons? Is there any out-and-out advocates for Peter?
No, but the same is true of quite a lot of appointments.
What, the
People have cons.
I guess I'm going back to what you said earlier, which is that the Prime Minister talks to lots of people before coming to the decision himself, but so far everyone you've listed seems to be on the fence as to whether or not Peter Mandelson was a good appointment or worth the risk. I'm just wondering how you get to the point where you've got two candidates, and this is not to speak to the appropriateness of George Osborne in any way, shape or form, but you've got two candidates, one of whom absolutely everyone you speak to says, well, it's a coin toss on that one. So how does that end up being the candidate?
So what I haven't said is what each individual person conclusion they came to, in part because I don't remember precisely and I don't want to unfairly represent anyone else's views. Not only would people have said, I think there are pros and cons, but they'd have said, and this is what I think we should do. Mm-hmm. And the Prime Minister would have got a range of views. And he would have concluded based on the range of views which way he's going to go to. He would not have put up with people saying on the one hand and then on the other, so I'm going to sit on the fence. He'd have said, well, what's your view? What do you think we should do? And then he'd have got all those views and reached a decision. In the aftermath, I understand why people are mostly focusing on the cons that are raised, but I can tell you that there is no way the Prime Minister would just accept one person's view as being pro a candidate if everyone else had been against it. I think
even if it had been you.
Even if it had been me, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The Prime Minister has his own mind. He reaches his own decisions. Sometimes he takes advice from me and will go with it, and sometimes when I was there, he didn't. And all these other people that you're talking about are a close confidence to the Prime Minister, people who he's judgment, who he trusts and respects. People like Jonathan Powell, people like David Lammy, he's the senior staff that he has in number 10. These are people who he takes very, very seriously. And sometimes as an advisor, you make advice and the Prime Minister goes with you. And that's what happened this time, and I'm taking responsibility for that advice. There was other times where I'd say, I think we should go in this direction. And the Prime Minister would say, no, I've got a different view, I've got a different candidate, or I don't like your candidate, and he goes in a different direction. In a situation where I want to go in one direction and senior cabinet members want to go in another direction, he's more likely to weight it with those cabinet members. So it depends on each individual situation. But Keir Starmer is not somebody who just takes one person's view before going with it. He is a considerate Prime Minister. He takes on views. He respects the views of people like the current Deputy Prime Minister, the current National Security Advisor, and his senior staff. And he would have taken those views very, very seriously.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Richard.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. McSweeney, for the committee today. I'd like to ask a few questions about communication between Number 10 and the Foreign Office. It was rumoured last summer, last autumn, that the communication between yourself and Sir Ollie Robbins was assertive, emphatic, sweary even, and you've denied that. How did you communicate to the FCDO the desire from Number 10 to speed up the approval of Mandelson's developed vetting?
Thank you, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to answer this. I'm firstly very, very grateful to Sir Philip Barton for what he said about this swearing rumour. It is something that has caused me a great deal of stress for a number of months. I don't know why people do this in politics, put around untrue rumours. They phone lots of journalists. Those journalists then phone lots of politicians. That's how rumours get around. It is very, very corrosive. It's damaging for people's reputation, and a lot of people in Number 10 get that, and I think it's unfair for staff who can't speak for themselves. I'm grateful as well to the journalists, the vast majority of whom never covered that story because it wasn't true, and I'm so glad that Sir Philip Barton said today that I did not phone him, that he has no recollection of me swearing at him, and I have no recollection of swearing at him either. I denied it when I was repeatedly asked about it by journalists. Most journalists did not touch the story and showed a lot of integrity on that, and I think it's one of the most corrosive things that happens in politics. So I'm glad I got the chance to set the record straight. I did not swear at Sir Philip Barton. I did not swear at Sir Ollie Robbins either. And in his testimony, he said that I didn't call him, I didn't text him, I didn't email him. So I was not talking to Sir Ollie Robbins about this issue. And I have to say that because of what's happened, we're rightly all focusing on precisely what happened with this appointment. But I can tell you, in January 2025, this wasn't one of my most important issues. There was far more serious issues affecting the government and the country in January 2025 than the start date of an ambassador. That wasn't my priority at all. That wasn't the issue that kept me awake at night. And if I was talking to officials at all generally at that level, it wouldn't have been about this issue. What happens, I think it's important that we unpack this idea of pressure, because there's been a lot of conversation about it. There is pressure in government every day, and most of that pressure comes from within inside you. Every civil servant, minister and SPAD I worked with woke up every morning feeling pressure to make the country better, wanting to move faster. The challenges the country face are great. That's where the pressure comes from, and rightly so. And Number 10's job in all of this is to make sure that the Prime Minister's decisions are acted quickly. But there is a real difference between asking people to act at pace and asking people to lower standards. And we never did that. We never asked people to skip steps at any part of the process. I didn't speak to, I don't think I spoke to Ollie Robbins about the appointment or the start date. I think I had a conversation, at least one, maybe two, with Philip Barton, but it was on a wider Zoom call. As he said, it wasn't on a phone call, but it was all about, can we do this at pace, not can we do anything improper.
And I mean, accepting the point that your communication wasn't directly with Sir Ollie, we know from Sir Ollie's testimony that there was communication from Number 10 to the Foreign Office, even if it didn't include you both individually. And so who in Number 10 was applying this pressure that Sir Ollie described?
So the private office of Number 10 chased the appropriate department every day on decisions that the Prime Minister would have made. There would have been occasions where I'd have asked, where are we with this decision? But as a priority of Number 10 of our daily meetings, the start date of Mandelson was not something that was regularly on the agenda. It would have been sometimes. So what happens is the Prime Minister takes a decision, and then the private office will chase another private office. If it's a political issue, if there's a political barrier, then SPADs will chase SPADs, or occasionally it might elevate to talking to ministers about what's going on in the department. But in this case, the Number 10 private office would have chased the Foreign Office private office to see when this was happening. But none of the chasing would have been asking to skip steps, and I think that's very important, because we're talking about national security. And every single person that I worked with in Number 10 took national security very, very seriously. Everyone there knew what was at stake with national security and would not have played hard and fast with national security.
I just want to repeat back to you a couple of lines from Sir Ollie's testimony to this committee last week. He said, "My strong sense that there was an atmosphere of pressure and a certain dismissiveness about this DV process." And separately he said, "Throughout January, honestly, my office and the Foreign Secretary's office were under constant pressure." Do you refute that?
Like I said, I'd like to unpack the two elements of pressure here. We're under pressure to try and get decisions implemented. Our preference in Number 10 was that Mandelson was in post for the inauguration. And we wanted him in post for the inauguration because there was an opportunity to get to meet the new incoming administration and other key figures in DC. In the event, the Foreign Office were unable to get him in post by then. He didn't start for 3 weeks later. So they couldn't deliver on that timetable, and it wasn't the end of the world for us. It wasn't a big deal. Our preference was 20th of January. I believe he started in the 10th of February, sometime around then, 2 or 3 weeks later. So we didn't get the timetable that we wanted, but we wanted it to be done quickly. But I worry that this conversation that's happening, and it's right that it's happening because people need to understand what's happening, is bringing two things together that are completely separate. Yes, we wanted it done quickly, but at no point at any point in number 10 did I witness anyone being dismissive about DV or national security.
That pressure around the timeline may have been misinterpreted as pressure for an outcome. So how would you reconcile the pressure that Sir Ollie described last week with the Prime Minister having stated at Prime Minister's questions last week that no pressure existed whatsoever in relation to this case?
The Prime Minister was saying there was no question, there was no pressure in relation to vetting. I don't think I ever had a conversation with a senior official about anyone's vetting. As Ian Collard said in his letter, he didn't think it had any impact on the outcome of their vetting. I think there's a world of a difference between saying we want to go quicker and we want to be reckless. There's a world of a difference from saying to a taxi driver, I'm late for a plane, to can you break all the red lights and go speeding. There's a world of a difference between those things. One is proper. We want things done quickly. The people of this country should want, number 10, to say we want things done quickly. The other one is wholly improper. We want steps to be skipped.
I mean, you're talking about red lights. I mean, the pressure put on civil servants, potentially, meant that they missed 2 red lights on the form, on page 10, the summary form, which said that they recommended that he didn't pass DV. I mean, according to Ollie Robbins, he didn't see it. According to Ian Collard, he didn't see it. So they both of them missed those red lights. And is it not because of pressure being put on them?
That's not what either the testimony from Ollie Robbins or from Ian Collard's letter said. My understanding was he said that he does not assess that pressure affected the outcome. I thought that's what he said.
But neither of them can talk. You're the one who raised red lights and cab drivers. Both of them missed the red lights. Both of them missed the green, orange, red. Neither of them can tell us that they saw those 2 things. It seems to me to be fairly clear evidence that the DV was making a fairly strong recommendation. And yet we hear both of them seem to think that it was a borderline case leaning towards not.
So Ollie made his assessment and would have carried out the processes the way he saw fit. I can't comment on how the DV process worked. I'm only learning about the DV process in real time, watching these interviews and watching this committee's work. What I can say is that nobody in number 10 ever thought it would be acceptable to skip steps. Yes, we want to move quickly, but that does not and should never involve making decisions that put national security at risk. I haven't seen anything in Sir Ollie's testimony or Ian Collard's letter that suggests that they did not follow proper procedures. They're saying they did follow proper procedures. Why they missed them, I think, needs to be part of how we draw the lessons from this. But they're not saying that they did anything improper, and nobody's saying they were asked to do anything improper as well. You've heard from Sir Philip Barton, you've had the letter from Ian Collard and Sir Ollie Robbins and Cat Little, and these are all like brilliant people. None of them said they would be asked to do anything improper. And from everybody I know in Downing Street, private office people would not ask if other private offices to do anything proper. These are serious people who worry about national security.
We've got Fleur next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming in to see us today. I'm going to take you back to the very beginning of the process. It's famous that Peter Mandelson hosted dinners with political people at his house and in restaurants. It's widely reported. Did you attend any of those dinners in 2024 or up to your departure in 2025 at his house or in restaurants?
I didn't hear that last bit.
Did you attend any of Peter Mandelson's kind of private dinners that he hosted in his house or in restaurants? He held monthly dinners for political people. It's just reported. I haven't been to any of these. I don't think anyone here has, but have you been to any of those dinners?
So I've been to 2 dinners in his house. One was, I think they were both in 2024 with a wider range of people. I think 2, yeah. Maybe 1 lunch and 1 dinner, I think. In a restaurant in the whole 4 years I knew him, I think twice as well. I went for dinner with him.
Thank you. And we're trying to get to the bottom of who really proposed Mandelson's appointment. So you have said that you're sorry for your part in it, but also that before you started in post after the election, there were some access talks. You referred to access talks in January 2024, which you weren't party to, but which happened. You know that Peter Mandelson's name came up. Was it a done deal?
Oh, sorry. No. I didn't say whose name had come up.
Okay.
So I spoke to Simon Case,
Yep.
trying to piece together what happened, and he said, I said to him, I recall there being a sense that we always seem to have wanted a political appointment. And I said, when did you first remember this? And he said January, February 2024, that Simon Case asked the Prime Minister's access team what they thought about the US ambassador. They were replacing Dame Karen Pierce. They were thinking about who to replace her with and what the process was. And Simon Case was informed that the Prime Minister was minded to make a political decision, but as far as I know, Mandelson's name was not in that.
Okay. And at the the two dinners and lunches that you attended, did Peter Mandelson did he lobby you about becoming the ambassador to the US?
So he did lobby me, but not on either one of those dinners. One of those dinners was after he was ambassador, and I should say also I had dinner when I went to the US in the embassy. But he did lobby me, but I don't think at the dinners, no.
And the process you've talked about with George Osborne and Peter Mandelson were the two names in play. How far did the process of George Osborne's potential appointment that then didn't lead on, go? Did he have due diligence assessment made of him?
Yes.
And what was the outcome of that due diligence then? Was that the important factor between the two, one going before another?
That wasn't the important factor in my recommendation, no. I don't. I can't remember what the due diligence said for George Osborne, but it was carried out. I spoke to both of them, and the prime, and yeah, I think it was similar.
Okay, and your due diligence meetings with Peter Mandelson, and you subsequently asked for more in writing. How many times did you meet him, or how long were your meetings with him for the due diligence?
None. The due diligence report was carried out by PET.
All by PET, and by writing to you?
No. So PET carried out the process. Like I said in my resignation letter, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this, and I think that the way that whole process works isn't up to it. I think there should be, as default, an interview with the candidates for something like this. There wasn't. I was given a report, or the Prime Minister was given a report by the Propriety and Ethics team, which was the due diligence report. That was conducted by them without any involvement of me. They gave that to the private office. I then followed up with some questions, but apart from that email, that was the only part I played in it.
So that was the due diligence report that's now in the Humble Address papers that we've all seen. Is that the report you're talking about?
Mine is my email,
isn't it? Okay. Do you think the violence against women and girls aspect of this, and I absolutely appreciate you talking about the victims and survivors of Epstein right at the beginning of that, they are very much, and I think I can speak for the whole committee, on our mind as well. Do you think the violence against women and girls aspect of this, the relationship with Epstein, was downplayed during those conversations that you had with the other people advising the Prime Minister and with the Prime Minister at that time?
I think it should have been a lot more to the fore, and I know it's something the Prime Minister takes this issue very, very seriously and has done for a great number of years, and I think it should have been way more done so at the time, is my view. But my understanding of the nature of the relationship that Mandelson had at that time, not what I now know, was that he wasn't somebody who had defended Epstein. He wasn't somebody. He was very apologetic from having kept contact with him. He was very regretful for it. But I think it should have been. I do agree. It should have been much more to the fore at the time.
I know you weren't there in the interview. Do you think he was asked enough open questions, or the ability to give the full extent of his relationship?
There's no doubt he was. At a lot of stages. I mean, this was somebody who was in the public eye. There is no doubt.
And finally, for me, about the documentation of this process. Decisions of this magnitude should not be done informally, kind of on the sofa. At the previous committee sessions, members, we have become aware of a lack of some of the papers, and today it's been referred to the Prime Minister receiving a lot of views. We don't have any paperwork of that. The Foreign Secretary being involved a number of times. We don't have record of that. We don't have record of the George Osborne side of this, and there are other parts. Do you accept that this was not documented well, and why do you think that is?
Yeah. So I think government is conducted with conversations as well as papers. Prime Ministers should be able to phone people up and say, what do you think about something? I think it's right that decisions are recorded. It's difficult for me to say what's the appropriate level of recording the decisions and the minutes, because it's not where my expertise is. I think there certainly needs to be enough that people can see enough of a paper trail, but I also think it's appropriate for the Prime Minister to say, look, I want to get someone's views, I want to have a conversation with them. But those conversations are not the same as where he makes the decisions, and I think there needs to be enough recording around those, but it's not my area of expertise.
That sounds great, except that the decisions themselves weren't recorded. That's the point. You know, so, and I come back to the point. I mean, I know you say it's all the civil servants' fault and not yours, but you were in charge of that office where they weren't recording decisions being made.
I think they were recording decisions being made on a pretty regular basis.
You just haven't told us about them.
I saw regular paperwork on a whole bunch of decisions. If I've in any way slighted the people I worked with in number 10, please forgive me, because these were the most wonderful people, very serious people.
I'm sure they were, but I just want to see I just want to see evidence of decisions being made in relation to Mandelson and how those decisions were made. And we just, we have the humble address, we have all this paperwork coming out, we haven't seen any evidence of how these decisions were made. We're having to take the memories of witnesses that, as we can see, are different. Anyway, I'm sorry, Edward, you have another question.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to return to your original questions at the opening, which is when you're talking about the timeline and that prior to coming into government, in meetings with Simon Case, you're saying that the Prime Minister is already minded to make a political appointment. And according to what you said, at that point, no names were being discussed. But why was the Prime Minister already thinking about making a political appointment when, to this particular post, when we didn't know the outcome of the election, there was somebody good currently doing the job and a shortlist process for a diplomatic candidate had already been run? What is the logic saying that job there I might make a political appointment to?
So I don't think I said there was no names being discussed. I don't know what names Simon Case did discuss. That I just don't know, because I wasn't in that conversation. In January 2024 and February 2024, my total focus was on the election, and I was very reluctant to have any conversations with anybody about who would do what job if we won the election, because I didn't like that kind of talk.
That's fine. I'm just wondering why already, prior to the election, is that there is going to be a political appointment?
He didn't discuss it with me. I wasn't intimately involved in preparation for government work. I didn't have a view. I don't remember even having a view of it at the time. The Australians did something similar with Kevin Rudd. I don't know where the origin of that idea came from.
Okay, because to the Chair's point about this looking like it was a railroaded decision, you've already got, prior to the election, the PM identifying that position as somebody who wants to make a political appointment to. You've then got two candidates, and again, not to speak to the suitability of either of them, but one of them is a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm assuming the other one isn't. And everyone you speak to is giving you pros and cons as to is the other one actually a stooge? Is George Osborne just on there as so that you've got a tick box exercise? There are two candidates because you've gone through this entire process, ignoring all of the red flags, with all of the due diligence, with every conversation with every single person, saying, well, it's a difficult decision. There are pros and cons to that one. Are they also saying there's pros and cons to the other one? And does it not just come down to which one is a friend of a paedophile?
So, I think there's three things on that. One is I don't think that he railroaded. If the civil service was being told in January, way ahead of election, that should Labour win a general election, they would look to a political appointment, I think that was ample time to prepare processes, to talk to senior officials, to say this is the direction a Labour administration might want to go in. So that's the first thing. Second is that I think if Kamala Harris had won the US presidential election, I think it would have gone to a different candidate. Third is that the nature of the relationship between Mandelson and Epstein wasn't known to us at the time, and that's not the nature of the relationship that we understood it to be. That's not the nature of the relationship that he represented it to be. And the final part is George Osborne was a very credible candidate, and part of the thinking was the relationship between sister parties or parties of a similar political persuasion, his more recent experience, the fact that he had commercial acumen, the fact that he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. He was a very credible candidate and one that we gave serious weight to. Just
push back on a couple of those then, please, Mr. McSweeney, because actually we've already seen that the due diligence report contained the 2019 JP Morgan report, which shows that the relationship was more extensive. And as for putting in place the processes, the civil servant putting in place the processes, according to Philip Barton's timeline, it was barely a month that they were given to go through the entire process and do DV and agreement and everything in order to get him in place in time for inauguration, which was your desire.
Yeah. And if it had taken longer, which it did take longer, then so be it. We didn't ask them to skip any steps, and they weren't able to get it done in time for the inauguration. And of course, if they had said the timetable you want to deliver on is impossible, and we need a bit more time generally, or we want a bit more time in this one, that's what would have happened. There was nothing stopping the Permanent Secretary saying that to the Foreign Secretary, or there was nothing stopping the Permanent Secretary saying that to the Cabinet Secretary. We need a bit more time, and a month isn't long enough. As it turned out, they didn't complete the process until several weeks later.
I just want to just do an assessment now, where it's 4 minutes to 1. We hoped that we would finish by 1. I think we're unlikely to now because I know that everybody is agitating because they're all thinking actually there are further questions we want to ask. So what I would like to do at this stage is to say we aspire to finish by 20 past. We absolutely must finish by 30:30. And what I'll do is I think take Uma and then Alan and Alex, who I know have kind of quite a lot of some questions of Dan as well, and then I think John and Abdesem and Afra may have follow-ups, but I think we do it that way. So Uma.
Chair, thank you. I'd like to put on record that over the past decade I've worked twice with the witness. He's used to robust conversations with me. Hello, Morgan. In your opinion, actually let me rephrase, both Sir Philip Barton and Sir Ollie Robbins have said that it was Number 10's decision to announce the appointment of Peter Mandelson before the vetting process. Did you or did anyone in Number 10 make that decision? Or in your previous answer you said that was, you suspect Sir Peter Mandelson had said that. Was this a Number 10 decision or was it a Peter Mandelson decision?
It wasn't a Peter Mandelson decision. I don't know whose decision it was. It wasn't my decision. And as the Prime Minister said now, we would do things differently. But it didn't jump out to me as a problem that that DV was happening after the announcement. That's what happened in the case of the National Security Advisor and my own appointment.
And would you have expected senior civil servants to intervene, to flag any issues, to say, actually, this is not how the process happens, the vetting should happen first? Because Sir Philip Barton said that vetting should happen first. We're not from the civil service were not to be expected to know this. Would you expect the civil service to have intervened there and told you these things?
Yes, if somebody thought there was a problem with how it's being run. I had a pretty good relationship with both Simon Case and Chris Wormholtz as cabinet secretaries, met them pretty regularly, and there was always opportunities for them to tell me when and where, which they did do, if they thought a minister was doing something wrong, or if they thought a SPAD was doing something wrong, or if they were unhappy with something Number 10 was doing.
And you said that you made clear to the Prime Minister the pros and cons of this appointment, and that you wouldn't have put Peter Mandelson forward had Kamala Harris won the presidency. Do you think the politics of the day was weighing more heavily rather than the trade deal, or were they both hand in hand?
I honestly don't know if I'd have put him forward had Kamala Harris had won. I think he wouldn't have got it. I think there were a broader range of candidates that were available to the Prime Minister, and I think he would have probably have gone in a different direction because of the nature of the relationships that were available to other candidates. For me, the top concern was the trade deal, and his role as EU Commissioner was a big factor in that. But the potential political relationships were also a factor, yes.
Was the Prime Minister led to believe that Peter Mandelson's risks, the cons as you've set out, were manageable? Did you have that conversation with him? Did anyone have that conversation with him?
Yes, that was part of his conversations always.
And in your answer today, you said that you didn't feel that the truth at the time was put forward by Peter Mandelson in his response to your emails. Did you communicate that to the Prime Minister also?
No, at the time I thought he was telling the truth.
Okay, and so you didn't raise any issues with the Prime Minister that you had these concerns. You just put these questions to Peter Mandelson, you got the answers, and that was that? I
thought they were truthful.
Okay, and I asked Kat Little this question. I asked her if the developed vetting would have brought up the information that Bloomberg had in their leaks, really grave issues of Peter Mandelson sharing information about a market-sensitive matters when he was then in government, which is huge and a betrayal of this country. If that had been put to you, would you have ever considered Peter Mandelson?
Not at all, no way. And one of the things that subsequently surprised me, I would have assumed that, and maybe they did, but I would have assumed that our Foreign Office would have been in contact with US counterparts to see what information they held on him. But absolutely no way would he have come close to Number 10 or any job in this government had that been known.
And it looks like you've been following our evidence sessions closely. You've seen these traffic light boxes, the UKSV red boxes. It turns out every stage of this process I've never actually seen the boxes until this was leaked. So it's a bizarre process all round and one that doesn't seem fit for purpose. Had any of these issues been raised with you by the developed vetting, by the FCDO, by anybody? Had they been put to you as the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff?
No, they're completely compartmentalised from SPADs, and as it turns out, more from ministers than I thought it was too. And I think it's quite right that it's compartmentalised for SPADs. I think that there are clearly a lot of things that need to be learned about how all these things will work, but there is no way that anyone in the Foreign Office would have discussed DV, anyone else's DV with me at any point. So I think there's a lot that needs to be learned by this whole process. But and I said, and I felt at the time when all this came out in September, that look, I know what I did wrong. I know the judgment calls that I made that were wrong. I'll live with them for the rest of my life. But as a chief of staff and you're a political advisor, you also relying on the information being presented to you. There's a lot of people in the state whose job is to protect the state, the government, and reputation, and you rely on that information coming from you. You don't have the ability to investigate, to ask more questions, to look deeper and deeper, and clearly, it didn't work. It shouldn't be reliant on just one advisor giving bad piece of advice and then the whole thing goes wrong. The state needs to be more robust and stronger in all this.
My final question to you, Morgan. Everyone's talked about hindsight. There were lots that were known about Peter Mandelson before this appointment, and I appreciate that you have said that you made judgment call that you've since said is wrong. But there's a very well publicised friendship with one of the world's most notorious sex offenders. How was it that nobody within Number 10 had seen this as an issue that so many of us had an aversion to? What was going on there that this was not the immediate red flag?
So I think the thinking was that the time that he was in contact with Epstein, he presented as being an acquaintanceship. He regretted maintaining contact after his first conviction when he realised whatever he realised. I mean, according to his story at the time, he wasn't defending what this guy did in his first conviction, and he was saying that he was duped into understanding the nature of what had happened. So we
got convicted though. He couldn't get around that. I mean, he had been convicted, of sex trafficking a minor. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, how do you talk your way out of that? Once a friend has been convicted of that, surely they're no longer a friend, let alone staying in their flat.
Yeah, I don't have anyone in my life like that, but he didn't.
He did, you promoted him as being the next ambassador to the United States.
He didn't say that he was a friend. He denied that he was a friend. He tried to say he was a passing acquaintance, that he was somebody who didn't really know enough about to ask questions.
And the due diligence said otherwise?
The due diligence didn't say he was a friend, and Mandelson
stayed in his house. The due diligence said he stayed in his house.
Not happening in my house.
All right, Alan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for your time, Morgan. I think you said earlier that you thought the DV process might also pick up untruths or misrepresentations by Peter Mandelson. Do you know if the answers that he gave you on the Epstein follow-up or the due diligence report was sent to the DV system, the officers, to use as evidence to check the kinds of answers he'd given you?
I don't know.
Thanks. Thank you.
Alex.
Thank you, Chair. So we heard from Sir Philip this morning that he felt the speed of the appointment was unnecessary. Karen Pearce was doing a good job. The administration would take some time to set up. And Ollie Robbins, in his evidence, said the whole process felt weirdly rushed. So why did you push for such a short timeline between the announcement and the appointment?
I didn't. Did Ollie Robbins say it was weirdly rushed?
No, Jonathan Powell did.
Jonathan Powell. Okay.
So the pace of it wasn't raised with me as a concern at the time, other than we said we wanted number 10, and that was the consensus view, in place by the inauguration, so that he could begin the work. And in the end, the Foreign Office were unable to complete all the necessary arrangements by then. So there was no point where, if they'd said we needed more time to carry out further checks, that we'd have said we've got our own timetable here. You need to crack on regardless. So they took the time that they needed to do it right, and all of the evidence suggests that they carried out the processes in the correct way. I think we wanted to get. I mean, it's not unusual for Number 10 to say we want things to be happening quicker than the departments are prepared to move in, and it always ends up being Number 10 kind of gets some of its own way, and then the department gets some of its own way, and that's what happened in this case.
And you didn't think to consult with the head of the diplomatic service on that timeline before you announced it, and then put pressure on to deliver on that timeline?
I don't think that we publicly announced our preferred date when we made the announcement. No, I don't think we announced that when we announced that Mandelson was going to be the ambassador, that we said he would be ambassador by this date.
We twice heard, both from Philip Barton and Sir Ollie, that the Cabinet Office was asking whether DB was necessary at all, whether because Lord Mandelson was a Privy Councillor that would be sufficient. Presumably Cabinet Office wouldn't have done that off their own volition. Did that come from Number 10, and where did that thinking come from?
Absolutely not from number 10. I find that bizarre. I would have thought, of course, an ambassador would have to have DV.
Where might that would have come?
I have no idea. But I was reassured by what Philip Barton was saying, is that wasn't something that was considered for long. But I only found out about that as part of this. I find it bizarre. I would have assumed that, of course, the US ambassador should have DV. I don't know how serious of a suggestion it was by anybody.
You said yourself, because you were appointed without DV and the National Security Advisor was appointed without DV, it wasn't unusual. Do you think that the number 10, when you were Chief of Staff, had a dismissive or an uninterested approach to security vetting because of your own experiences?
No. I think everybody in number 10, because of what you learn in that job, takes national security more seriously than any other issue.
When you were appointed after the election, what level of security clearance did you have?
I think it's common practice for ex-civil servants to not talk about the security clearances they had, and I'll continue that practice, because when you're in post, you're told you can't say what clearances you have. I had all the necessary clearances to do my job, and I saw whatever papers I was given, and that process is managed by civil servants.
Okay, so you had DV at the point that you were appointed as Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister?
I don't want to say what my security clearances were, but I had all the security clearances I needed to do my job, and I completed the forms and the processes and the interviews the same as anyone else.
I mean, this whole thing is about security clearances, developed vetting. We've had a long conversation about the process. I think if you had developed vetting at that point when you were Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, you would be able to tell us. And I'm surprised that you're not telling us.
Because what I understand from speaking to civil servants is that the practice is that they don't share what security clearances they had. I'll follow that practice, but only to say that I had all the necessary clearances to do my job, to read the papers I read, to attend the meetings that I attended, and that I completed every form and everything that was asked of me in all of those processes.
And do you think that attitude, because it's a different process for SPADs than it is for civil servants, and I got DV when I was in the Foreign Office, as I think every other person does, do you think that contributed to you trying to expedite the process and having an uninterested attitude towards Peter Mandelson getting DV?
Not at all. I think there would have been no suggestion from anyone in number 10 to skip steps or to take any risks on national security. But at the same time, I wouldn't have asked the Foreign Office about how someone's security clearance are going, because that's not something the Foreign Office would discuss with me.
There are photographs taken, though, of people wearing their passes, and they're different colours. So a green one is DV and an orange one is the lower level. And so there's a photograph of you with a green pass, but not when you first took over the job of being Chief of Staff. So when did you apply for your DV, and how long did it take for you to get it?
I don't recall. The process as well is driven by how quick people fill their forms in.
Yeah.
A lot of people take a very long time.
Would it be unfair to suggest that you didn't fill in the form straight away?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know why you think I didn't fill in the forms. I filled in the forms as quickly as I could. They're quite extensive, and it's not something that you could just sit down in an hour and rattle your way through. And if you don't get it completed, I mean, it takes a long time. But I took all of that side of things extremely seriously, because in order to do my job, I needed to have necessary clearances. And I filled in whatever forms. You also have to gather a lot of information about things. It takes a while, but I always did it as best as I could and as quick as I could.
On the 4th of February, Parliament passed a motion requiring the divulgence of all communications relating to the appointment of Peter Mandelson. On 25th of March, you reported that your telephone had been stolen. Now, the Metropolitan Police have released the transcript of the call you made relating to the theft of your mobile phone. You didn't say, "This is the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. My government issue phone has been stolen," which one would imagine would have been taken pretty seriously. You just said, "Oh, hello, someone just robbed my phone." Why did you not make it clear that this wasn't just an ordinary theft, this was a phone which was likely to contain highly sensitive information?
So, the dates are slightly incorrect. My phone wasn't stolen on the 20th of March. My phone was stolen on the 20th of October. So it was 4 months before. I gave up my government phone pretty much as soon as I left. Within a couple of days, I handed all my kit back to number 10. My phone was stolen on the 20th of October. I was a victim of crime. Somebody hopped onto the pavement and took my phone from me. The first thing I did was to try and retrieve it. I tried to chase, which was probably a mistake. The next thing I did was I phoned number 10, and I would have gone with whatever they told me to do. Now, I thought at the time that they would be able to track the phone, and that's what would happen, given, as you say, what's potentially on that phone, and that was my assumption. I then called 999. If number 10 had told me, "You need to tell the police, or you need to tell the call handler what your job is," I would have done so. But otherwise, I didn't do that as a matter of course. I didn't, in any part of my job, go around saying, "I'm a very serious and senior person." If number 10 had asked me to do that, I would have done that. I also thought, wrongly, again at the time, I thought a squad car might come by and I could explain a bit more if the squad car had come by. And then I made further phone calls to number 10 where I'd hoped that they could track the phone and I could tell the police where that phone was. And like you and like everyone else kind of reading about this, I was quite surprised by how limited the security is around Chief of Staff's telephone.
One of the reasons the squad car didn't come round may be because you gave the wrong location. You said you were in Belgrave Street, which the operator interpreted to be in Stepney, and said, you said he turned left, there's a park on top of the road, and the operator said, "Stepney Green Park, okay?" And you said, "Yeah, he turned left there." That wasn't anywhere near Stepney, it was in Pimlico, I understand.
So I also said I was in Westminster. So I said I was in Belgrave Street, Westminster, where I think I was on Lower
Belgrave Road?
No, I think I might have been on Lower Belgrave Street.
Okay.
So it was some months ago, and I missed the Lower. I didn't see it. I was also
missed the operator saying Stepney Park.
I was also quite adrenalised. So what happened was I chased the guy who stole my phone as far as I could. I was out of breath. I was completely exhausted because I'm 48 years of age and I shouldn't be chasing people down the street. And then I was trying to go back to the original location that it happened so that I could tell the 99 operator. As I was following the guy, he turned away from a park that I could see in front of me, and as I was coming back to try and find the original location, I just assumed that the call handler was looking at it on the map. I haven't heard the audio. I can't imagine that I was clear and coherent at the time. I was out of breath, I was adrenalised, and if I gave any wrong direction, it wasn't intentional, but I did say I was in Westminster, and why the squad car didn't come had nothing to do with how the call handler had heard it. The call handler had said the squad car wasn't coming while we were on the call, and if the call handler had said to me the squad car is there, I'd have been much more precise about where I was so that I could meet the police at the time. And as I said, I had thought wrongly that my phone would be tracked so I could retrieve my phone.
Can we take it that your phone would have contained quite a lot of communications either with Peter Mandelson or about Peter Mandelson's appointment?
Probably not as much about his appointment that hasn't already been available to number 10, because when he was sacked, number 10 did do its own, I wouldn't say investigation, but its own research on what happened and why it happened. And as part of that process, I was asked to share messages and emails about the appointment, and also been interviewed, as were other members of staff.
So those messages are therefore recorded somewhere?
Everything that I had at that time in September, which was more than a month before my phone was stolen, I shared it with the number 10 team. Beyond that, any messages that I sent to ministers or staff or officials would still be on their phones.
That should be in the humble address material at some stage.
Yes.
Then.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
So actually, there is a record, you believe, of all your communications from that phone, which, if relevant, will be released.
So I don't think that I don't think all of my phone records will still be available, but I don't know what the recipients of my messages have, and they'll have to share their messages too. So I can't tell you what the Cabinet Office have. I'm not in charge of the humble address process, and wasn't when I was there, and I haven't been told by the Cabinet Office what's been released and when, but I gave all of my government kit back to number 10 when I left.
One would assume that given the sensitivity of the material on this phone, and maybe all sorts of things besides Peter Mandelson, that there would be quite a robust effort to try and recover it. Has there been any news as to whether or not it's been found? Or
police keep me up to date, but I don't think that I should share the latest. But they haven't found the phone. No.
Just very quickly following on from Sir John's questions. So for the missing period from October onwards in relation to the content of your phone, was it not backed up to a cloud or linked to a device, or have we lost all data for that period?
So from October 20th to my departure, all of those messages should still be on the phone that I gave back to the government, so they should have all of that. For everything prior to that, whatever the settings were on the phone, I didn't change them. So I didn't change whatever default settings people have on WhatsApp.
It could be linked to a cloud. It could be backed up somewhere.
I don't know. I don't know. My understanding is it's not, that they don't go connect back to the cloud, but whatever the default settings were on my phone, I just kept those. The government phones are pretty restrictive at what you can do as a member of staff with them. When I became Chief of Staff, we couldn't copy and paste on those phones.
Thank you.
Did you have disappearing messages on your WhatsApp? That's the question.
Yes, with some people, yeah. With most people. Yeah, I think I did.
Peter Mandelson, did you have disappearing messages?
I probably did, yeah. Yeah.
I've got just one other sweep-up question before I go to Afra. You've been asked about dinners with Lord Mandelson. I wondered if you could also tell us. I think there were also monthly dinners at Lord Liddell's, which I believe Peter Mandelson used to attend to. And were you attending those?
I attended a couple of dinners with in Roger Liddell's house that Mandelson was at. The reportage of these dinners, I think, were just made it sound like these were something that was happening when we were working in opposition. I read about them in a book. They weren't.
We all know what book it is.
Yeah,
I mean, it's was it not also a part of the history of Labour Together as well?
No. So I'll explain a little bit about it if I could, because I think there's a bit of stylisation going on. A lot of that period the book is covering is COVID, so nobody was going around to anyone's house for dinner. Mandelson did not like Labour Together at all. He was not a fan of what I was doing. He was not interested in it. He broadly didn't agree with it. So I think the first conversation I had with him, I think from my best memory, was 2017. And the reason why I had a conversation with him, I was also having a conversation with a lot of former senior Labour grandees, was because there was a group of Labour MPs who were arguing to split the Labour Party. I did not agree with that. I thought it was a terrible idea, and I was trying to basically make the case and build support to oppose that. I met with Mandelson as part of that. He wasn't particularly interested in what I was doing at Labour Together at all whatsoever. The next time I really started to meet him more was about 2019 at social gatherings, a couple at Roger Little's house, but I didn't really have a one-to-one relationship with him. I don't think he backed Keir Starmer to be leader of the Labour Party. I don't recall him doing so. He certainly didn't. Certainly wasn't working on the campaign, wasn't donating to the party. So if he voted for him, which he might have done, but from what I could tell, so this sort of mythos that's being built, that he is some sort of guiding hand behind me on my strategies or my life, is not the case. I started to try engage with him for advice in about late 2020, early 2021, I can't remember when I was thinking about how do we win the next general election. I also did so with characters like Margaret McDonough or Spencer Livermore or people who had run campaigns before, because I wanted to know what a winning campaign would look like, and he had been part of one in 1997, and that's why I engaged with him then. But there was no closeness of a relationship prior to then whatsoever.
Thank you. Civil servants, including those in ambassadorial roles, can be eligible for a severance payment when their employment's terminated. Were you aware that Peter Mandelson would receive a severance payment on leaving his role?
No.
So at no time until it came out in the media were you ever told or aware that he would get payment? You weren't consulted at any stage on the terms of his departure?
I wasn't consulted on his departure. I don't know if I was aware, but I wasn't consulted or didn't give a view, wasn't asked for a view.
Okay. And were you aware whether others in number 10 were considering whether making a severance payment would reduce the likelihood of Lord Mandelson potentially becoming a public critic of the government? I
don't know. His contract is with the Foreign Office.
Okay.
So
you don't recognise the kind of reports that there may have been emails that said that if they paid him off, it would limit his reputational risk?
Just what I read. I wasn't in those conversations, so I don't know much about him, I'm afraid.
But do you believe those conversations may have taken place?
I don't know. Okay. Not with me.
And I think you just got...
Just for the record, I attended a dinner at Roger Little's with Peter Mandelson, I believe after he was appointed ambassador.
And was Morgan McSweeney there? That's the last question. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry we've taken so long. If we could, everyone could remain seated for the moment. Order.